Hello everyone, my name is Thomas Eck and welcome to my channel. Today I decided to make my very own guide talking about the lovely Miss Vampire, Rachel Alucard. Now before we go into depth about Rachel Alucard, I want to go over where she's at the tier list and her pros and cons. I'm not gonna go over her normals really because with Rachel it's gonna take me a while to explain how to play Rachel. Now, where she's at in the tier list, Rachel is mid-tier and okay. Much better. So where Rachel is at, she's around mid-tier and a little bit closer to top tier. I say a little bit closer to top tier because if you use Rachel right, she can be devastatingly scary to go up against because Rachel is really strong in this game. Now let's go over her pros and cons now. Her pros is Rachel can change her playstyle. She can be a zoner, and she could be a rushdown character. Give me a second. Like that. Has very crazy mix-up potentials. Another thing I want to talk about is her pros is that Rachel is really good at being the last character alive. So if you have 4 down the below, right next to Resonance Blaze, Rachel is actually pretty scary to go up against. I'll show you why. Nah, that's not a good way to say it. You illustrate it. Look at the amount of chip damage you can do to Rachel, or to your enemies, period. You can also just keep doing this over and over. And just use George and get him closer. Look how much chip damage you can do to your opponent. I'll go more in depth on how you can use Resonance Blaze when you're the last character as Rachel, but let me just tell you that she is ridiculously scary to go up against as ridiculously scary to go up against when she has her Resonance Blaze and she's at 4 times. With the right partner, Rachel can really make a difference with her rushdown. So I have Elizabeth, for example, because Elizabeth really helps her out a lot. So let me show you guys an example. So something like that with the right partner, and I think Elizabeth is really deadly of assist for her. You could do something as crazy as that. Let's go over. Oh no, let's not go over cons yet. One of the other pros is that Rachel has very good use of her bars. So you could use her tiny ability of the X version to do her set play real fast. and do her Battle of Lotus or Sword Iris. And one of her best, what should I call it? One of her X version, George, is really useful to throw out at times. And what's best about George is you can just call George out and tag her out, and George will still keep crawling towards your opponent. Now, the only way how George will disappear is if your opponent attacks it. I think it has, I forgot how much health George has. So either your opponent destroys it or your opponent touch Rachel. Now let's go over cons. Rachel doesn't, there's really not a lot of cons, to be honest, I could think of with Rachel a la carte. There's only 2 cons that I can really think about with Rachel. Ooh, one thing I forgot to point out about her post is that her assist is actually really good, in my opinion. Her 6P assist is pretty good to throw out through full screen and help your teammates such as Elizabeth to help get closer to your opponent. And her 4P assist, Sword Iris, it sets off any rods that is laid on the floor, which is really good because it can help you make your opponent stand down, stay at bay. And also her 6P is pretty good as an anti-air assist as well because it comes out really fast. And her 5P assist is also pretty good as for corner pressure. Although it can be easily push block, it still is helpful. So you can do something like this, and just continue combo from there, like, you know, simple bread and butter combo for Elizabeth. Now let's go over her cons. I can only think of 2 cons, to be honest. One, she doesn't do a lot of damage, so that really, she doesn't do a lot of combos, mostly around range around to like 4,000 to 5,000, 6,000 if you're able to do like a super or get an assist in. And the last con is that Rachel is extremely hard to play. Out of all the characters in this game, Rachel is one of the characters that is pretty hard to play. Rachel is really hard to play, Blake is pretty hard to play, Weiss is pretty hard to play, Igus is pretty hard to play. All those characters I named, it takes months. I don't even think months could even for you to be able to master Rachel. But it takes way longer to master her than than Ruby or Ragna or Narukami, for example. Those characters I just think they are pretty easy to master, but Rachel, it'll take a couple months to really gravitate and to understand how to play Rachel. Even though this guide, I hope this guide can help you out a lot. But that is one of her cons too. Her biggest con, to be honest, is that she's really hard to master. Okay, so let's go over tips, and I'll show you her basic bread and butters, and I'll show you a perfect assistance or a teammate that can really help Rachel out. So let's go over her tips first. She can control the movement of her tiny lobelia. That's how you pronounce it? Yeah, tiny lobelia. She can control the movement of it. She can go up with it. She can go forward, and she can bring it down. Now I'm going to tell you guys when to use those movements. Let's start with this move first. I usually like to use this right after I finish a combo. So let me give you guys a simple bread and butter. So I do that, and once I do that, then I use Bed of Lotus and try to get closer to my opponent and to continue my rush down. You can also, for example, let me do it again. Oops. You can call out Elizabeth's Assist just to help you get in even more closer to your opponent. If you want to add more pressure to your opponent. So that's basically when I use this. The up version, I usually use this when I'm zoning. So if your opponent like comes up to you, for example, you can quickly do Battle of Lotus, because you can use Battle of Lotus whenever you want to. That's the beauty of playing Rachel a la carte. You don't have to use Battle of Lotus as soon as it lands. You can just automatically call Battle of Lotus or Sword Iris as soon as you deploy it out. So when I see my opponent try to get closer to me, I quickly do Battle of Lotus and just do a combo. And either I push them away, or if I'm in a wall, I set up my George to set up more of my rush down. But I'll get more into George later. I just want to touch upon when to use her, how to use her Tiny Lobelia more effectively when you play Rachel. Down version, I don't really use it too much, to be honest. Sometimes I just deploy it right here just to keep me safe, because when my opponent tries to come at me, I'll just use Battle of Lotus just to protect me, and I can just move closer to my opponent and use my rush down ability. Now let's go over her B version of Tiny Lobelia. Now this is where it gets interesting. It goes even like further. When you do the up version, it goes all the way up and it lands towards full screen. The forward version, it pushes them all the way towards the back over here. And the down version is the same thing as this, to be honest. Just brings you closer to you. Now with this, you want to also, doing the up version, I either do it by zoning, or when I do my bread and butter, like this, for example. I'll do that when I do my combo. And whenever I end my combo, the Tiny Lobelia always gets closer to me when I finish my combo, right? Yeah. Then I continue my stream, my dumbass. Continue my pressure. So that's when I normally use it, to be honest. When I do this, I usually do it by when I'm zoning. So right after I say, like when you do this combo stream. Oh my god. You can do Battle of Lotus and then go it again and then continue your zoning from there. I only use it when I'm zoning against my characters. And once again, I don't really use this too much, to be honest. I really don't use it too much. So, Battle of Lotus, let's talk about her Battle of Lotus and her Sword Iris now. I usually use my Battle of Lotus majority of the time as zoning, keep away, basically it's the same thing, or when I do my rush down. So as I demonstrated with you, her bread and butter, and call my Battle of Lotus to continue on with my pressure. That's when you want to do it, and then you can do this, for example. If you're from full screen, you can just do the up version and then do the forward version. If you do it fast, you can make them all both go faster. I mean, closer to your opponent. You can also do with the B version as well. Make them both go from the behind, just to confuse your opponents. So really, I would really like test out these kinds of things. Just play around with it. So with our Sword Iris, if you see me play Rachel, I don't really use it too much. I usually use Sword Iris when I'm closer, when I'm like, no, I'm not closer, when I get my opponent from the corner. I don't know why it took me that long to explain it. So I'm gonna show you something and do something like that. That's when I usually use Sword Iris. I never really use Sword Iris when I'm in like mid-screen or full screen. Nah, I don't really use it that much. I only use Sword Iris when I'm when I got my opponent towards the wall. Now let's talk about Rachel's pressure. Rachel's rushdown is something you don't want to underestimate. Her rushdown is just as scary as Igus. So she could do an instant overhead. She has 2 instant overheads. This, her jump A, her jump C. You want to utilize that. And how you do it, as soon as you press 5A, you jump up, and then you go down 2A, down, jump A, and then go up and then do jump A again to do an instant overhead to your opponent. I'll put the notation up too in case if you guys didn't understand. It should be somewhere around the screen. So yeah, you want to get yourself familiarized with how to do this instant overhead because it's really useful, and majority of the time your opponent will most likely never block an overhead, only for like the first couple of matches. Till then your opponent will start to become more aware on to block your overhead, and once they do that, you could do 5A to 2A to confuse your opponent. You can do that. Or if your opponent blocks it, you can even do something even more deadly by doing 5A, jump A, jump. Wait. You could do something like this. I'll just put a notation up. So like that. You could do that as well. And also, you can even mix it up by doing a grab. You can do that as well. And also, you should keep in mind that sometimes your opponent will push block you a lot of times. So, if you are going up against an opponent that push block a lot, you can bait out your opponent by just doing 5A and then block, and then do a deadly punish on that. So, for example, you can do something like that. And you can also, you can also try to do it in instant overhead because your opponent can't DP out of it. So you can do that. So if you do something like this, you can look out for that. And also, if your opponent reads that you're going to grab, it's okay. But if you want to punish your opponent for missing a grab, for example, you could do something like this. you have to really get into your opponent's head when you're playing a rushdown character. Just like Neo, for instance. Neo, you really have to play inside of your opponent's head in order for it to work. So you can bait up your grab. Oops, messed up. You can bait out a grab, you can bait out a DP. You can do an instant overhead. You can do an instant overhead, or you can mix it up with a or you can mix it up with a wall. So you want to get yourself familiarized by that. So remember. Those are the things that you need to keep in mind of when you do your rushdown. Next is George. So let's talk about George real quick. This has got to be like the best tool that Elizabeth has. What's really great about this is that you can also manipulate George to go further. So you can do something like this, test to push George even further. And also you can do something like this. What's also crazy about this is that you can't push block your partner. So let me show you an example. You can't push your opponent, so you can continue your partner's pressure by doing that. So that's really crazy. Almost similar as Elizabeth Haman. And you could do some crazy stuff with that, which I'll go more into depth with that later. On like who would best suit a partner for Rachel. So yes. So when I zone with George, I make sure I have as much meters I have from down below. I forgot the word, but it's this one, Silipede or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I look at it down below. You see that little rose with that 4 meters? I keep that in mind, and if I have more, I just do something like this. Just to push them forward, which is great because I'll show you guys. So when they reject, you can just call Battle of Lotus and continue more of your pressure, or if you have a good assist, you can just call out Elizabeth, for example, and call her 6P assist to help you get even more closer to your opponent. So you want to keep that in mind and use a lot, to be honest, because that will help you out with your pressure, your rushdown slash zoning. So let's talk about what's really crazy with Rachel when using George, for example. She could do this, for example. Oops, I forgot. Give me a second. She could do that, literally force you to stay locked down and do an instant overhead or do a 2A or low. I think that's quite insane. But also, a little tip for doing George, for example, your opponent could just move forward after they've been knocked down to the ground. Like, for example, let me show you. They could just do that just to avoid George pressure. There is a way to avoid that, so let me show you. You can, right after you call George, you can just move back by doing that as well. I'll show you the notations down below. It should be somewhere around the screen. You want to become familiarized by doing that, because, and what's also best about this is that your opponent can't mash out of it. So if your opponent tries to mash out of it, you are automatically more faster to attack them, and you can like push them to move forward towards George and continue more of your pressure. So yes, Rachel is, like I said, completely insane with her rushdown and her zoning, which is why I really love Rachel a lot, because she can change her playstyle so quickly. Let me see what else I can talk about with Rachel. Oh, Tempestalia. You could use this as a zoning, and then get closer to them, and do like something cheeky about doing 2A, or bait out your opponent's DP, and do a dirty punish, or do an instant overhead, or after Tempestalia is finished, you could just do a grab. So something like this. You can do something like that, or do an instant overhead, or do a 5A, and then continue to string from there. Tempestalia is pretty good, although it does push your opponent back, which is fine, because if you have a good assist that can make your opponent lock down like Elizabeth 6P, you can still continue on with your pressure, which I'll show you more later. Also, corner. You can also use Tempestalia in the corner too, so, for example, and what's best about this is that your opponent can't escape it once they're when they're at the corner. Your opponent can't escape it, so your opponent will have no choice but to guess if you're going to do an instant overhead, or do a 2A low, or do something really cheeky by doing a quick grab of grit. Like for example, or do a grab like just like that, or like I said, do you do that? Oops, no. Or just do something like that. So yes, you can use Tempestalia to get closer to your opponent, or you can use it as a rush down too, or you can even use it as zoning, like I said with her resonance. What else? Bad and Lily. This move, you can use this as a DP. Because what's great about Bad and Lily is that you can get a combo after this. Oops. Oh, come on. You do something like that. You want to do the forward one, by the way. Don't do the down one. It was just just bad on my part. But yes, you could use it as a DP. Do keep in mind that it's unsafe on blocks, so your opponent can do devastating damage towards you. But if your opponent is constantly rushing down on you and they don't bait up your DP or anything, you could just quickly just do Bad and Lily and do your combo from there. Also, she does more damage when you set more of her tiny Lobelia, like that damage for example. So if you want to try to do as maximum damage as you can, you want to make sure to get 3 Tiny Lobelias and then do her Bad and Lily so she can get as much damage as she can as Rachel Alucard. Another thing that I like to point out is, hold on, when she is her residence, if you jump up and do a Bad and Lily, it is actually safe on block. Your opponent cannot block it because your opponent cannot punish you because she jumps down. She jumps down and she recovers quite quickly from it. She recovers quite quickly from doing that. So if your opponent comes like if your opponent comes rush down to you, you can just jump up and just do Bad and Lily, and then continue your pressure just from that. Or if you get a hit from that, you can even get a combo from that. So that's something to keep in mind of with Bad and Lily. What else? I'm trying to think, because I want to cover up as much information I have through my experience with Rachel Alucard. Oh, this. You want to keep that in mind, because you don't even have to use throw out Tiny Lobelia and then try to move up, try to do something like that. You can use this whenever you want, and I usually use this just to, if I'm getting close to the corner, to the wall, and my opponent tries to, you know, try to get closer to me towards the wall just to apply pressure, I also automatically just do this just to get away from it. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, I also do this, like you'll see from Susanoo got the character that the partner that would help me out with by doing this, I'll show you later, is Susanoo, which I'll get more into details with that later. So I'll go more into depth with this as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have. Anti-air you can use 2A. It's a pretty good anti-air to throw out. Do not use 2B as an anti-air because she recovers really slow and your opponent can do a heavy amount of damage to you if your opponent blocks it correctly. But if you did this by accident when your opponent is blocking, immediately just throw out Tiny Lobelia, because when you throw out Tiny Lobelia, it is safe on block. Not this version though, keep that in mind, because it comes out really slow. So just quickly just throw the A version of Tiny Lobelia if you accidentally do this when your opponent is blocking. I don't really like to use this too much. To be honest. I don't really think it's that useful in my opinion. I'll just do this when I'm doing a combo, basically. Oh! I guess I'll cover this. Actually, no, I can cover that right now. Also, this is considered an instant overhead as well. The way how you do it is I'll put a notation up. As soon as you do down, jump C down, you want to also press 5B as well, just to cancel it because when you do something like this, she's like in that position, and you can't get a combo off of that. So as soon as you do her jump C down, you want to press jump B as well, so you can do a combo. Okay, I think we covered the tips right now, so let's go over her basic bread and butter. I'm not going to do that much commentary over it, so I'm just going to play out my combos and I'll put in the notation of it as well. Okay, so that covers up Rachel's, oh my god, Rachel's prominent bread and butters. The bread and butters that I usually use a lot when I go online and use. So we took care of combos, so let's go over her best synergies. The best synergies I think Rachel really works well with would be characters like Susanoo, Elizabeth, Ruby, and Yumi. I can't think of any characters that would work really really well, like a really deadly synergy in Unnight and Early Birth. Only characters I can think of that would work deadly with Rachel would be characters like I said, Yumi, Elizabeth, Susanoo, and Ruby. Those are the 4 characters that I think would work really deadly with Rachel. So let me go over Elizabeth's right now, since I've already got her on here right now. So let's go about Elizabeth 5P. Elizabeth 5P is probably the best 5P in this game, to be honest. Because what's great about Elizabeth 5P is that your opponent can't push her persona. So let me show you. They can't push your persona. So you could do something like this. You could do something like that. Hold on. So you could do something like this. Oh my god. You can do something like that. You could do something like that as well. So Elizabeth 5P assist really makes your opponent locked down, which is great because so you can do the following. It's an overhead, her 2A, her jump A, to a grab, all that good stuff. Elizabeth 4P is it's okay. I usually just throw it out there just to help me out if my opponent is getting too crazy, trying to approach me as fast as they can. If I don't, set up her tiny lobelia, I just call out Elizabeth 5P. Not 5P, her 4P. Elizabeth 6P, I use it when I'm from full screen and then try to get closer. And like I said, when I do, when I do something like this, that's not gonna connect. Shoot. Come on. No. So something like that. Sometimes your opponent will jump, but they'll still be locked down with her Battle of Lotus still up in the air. Because the tiny ability, her Battle of Lotus will try to slowly try to approach to your opponent. So yes, that, and also what's his name? The guy that I told you about, like the best Blizz tank slash Elizabeth player. He went over briefly of like the potential of Haman. So you do something like this. You can push block her Haman, so you could do like an instant overhead, her 2A, or jump A to a grab. So that's really dangerous. So like I said, Elizabeth and Rachel works really well together. And also, if you want to quickly tag Rachel out, you could call out Rachel's 6P assist, and then do Elizabeth my Zidon, and then do Battle of Lotus and try to get closer to your opponent, and then continue with the streams, something like that. So yeah, those two work really well together. Showed you briefly on how those two can synergize really well with each other. So let's go over Susanoo and Rachel now. Now Susanoo helps Rachel out so much. Let me just tell you, I have a video that is coming out today just to show you just how much deadly those two work together. Those two may not like each other, and it's like do like lore wise, but those two really help each other out so much. So let's talk about Susanoo's 4P. Like I said, you could go guide. Susanoo probably has the best 4P assist in the game. Because look at the hitbox, it's ridiculously big. 5P assist. You could use that, you know, to cross over, and then just do, you know, a combo. If you manage to get, like, okay, let me show you an example. You do something like that. Also, I sometimes use Susanoo's 5P when your opponent attacks out, like for this example. And just do a combo from there. Now, Susanoo's 6P, what? 5P assist is when things starts to really get interesting. Something like that. I will continue the combo, but Susanoo's 6P assist could literally lock your opponent down. Your opponent can jump it, but you'll still have to deal with Rachel's pressure. Like you'll see in the video that I uploaded. It's ridiculously good, and like I said, you could like either do her instant overhead to do 5A to 2A, or do jump A to a grab, all that good stuff. So yes, really good. Susanoo lacks tools to do from full screen, so you want, you know, a partner that can help Susanoo out to get closer. Rachel 6P is 6P. Oh my god. Yeah, 6P, right? Yeah, 6P. Yeah, Rachel 6P really helps helps Susanoo get closer to his opponent, and you know, he do his good stuff for this pressure. Stuff like that. Susanoo doesn't really need Rachel's help that much. I feel like all he really needs for her is her 6p assist, and when your opponent gets close to the corner, you could do like Rachel's 5p assist and do like his jump A. If your opponent expects like you do a 2A when you go for like do something like this, you can like confuse your opponent, just do a 2A instead of a jump A. So yeah, and then 4p anti-air assist that can help Susanoo out as well. Since Susanoo's anti-air is meh, to be honest, not the best, but well, it's there. Ruby is similar to Susanoo. Ruby's 6p assist really helps Rachel out to like make her opponents stand by. Her Rachel's 6p assist is really fast, just as Susanoo's 6p assist. You can also use Ruby's 5p assist to do a crossover as well. And Rachel's 4p assist used to be the best before Susanoo came in. You could use Ruby's 4p assist if your opponent, you know, doesn't get in too close to you. Also, I forgot to mention Elizabeth. Rachel's backdash is really good. Look how far she could back away from her opponent. I think Rachel's backdash is one of the best in the game. Her movement is just really good too. Forgot to mention that Rachel's mobility is really good. Who's next to talk about Susanoo? Yumi. Okay, so let's talk about Yumi. Her 5p assist locks your opponent down, which is really good and beneficial for Rachel, because you can do an instant overhead, 2A, jump A, to a grab, all that good stuff. I keep saying that over and over and over again. So that's one good use of it. Also, another good thing is Yumi's 6p. It's a projectile and it freezes your opponent. So let me give you an example of how deadly you could do something like this. So you can make your opponent do a reset and either do an overhead or do a 2A or do a grab. So your opponent would literally have to guess like what you're going to do. Either do an overhead, 2A, or a grab. But also keep in mind that your opponent can just DP out of it. So you'll also have to play rock and paper scissors as well. So if you bait out your opponent DP, you can do a heavy punish on that. Also, do keep in mind of that you want to do her 5B just to do as maximum damage as you can. So do keep that in mind as well. So yes, Yumi, really good partner for Rachel. Also, with Rachel's 6p assist, you can help her get closer and do her shenanigan rushdowns. And if you do throw out her Tanalabilia and do Sword Iris and your opponent gets hit, she can follow up quite easily. And what's best is Yumi is really good at getting her opponents close to the wall, which will help Rachel out with her um for her rushdown pressure. So that will help Rachel out a lot. Now, partners that Rachel can work with, not as deadly synergy as those four I mentioned, but they have somewhat of a good synergy, would be characters like Yukiko, Neo, and Hilda. I'm not really going too into depth with Rachel and Yukiko because I already explained it in Yukiko Guide. If you guys didn't know that I'm making Yukiko Guide, I will put it in the description below. But let me go over Neo real quick. Yes, as crazy as it is, those two do have a pretty good synergy. Like I said, Rachel's 6P assist helps Neo or your partner to get in closer to her. And what's also really good is if you just call Rachel 6P assist, you could do the instant overhead for Neo. Let me make Rachel block for a second. So you can, when you call Rachel 6P assist, you can do Neo's instant overhead teleportation to lock your opponent down. And then call Battle of Lotus and then try to get closer to your opponent and then do your ridiculous rushdown. Also, right after you do a finisher string with Neo, like for this, for example, you could just do this and then call out Rachel's 5P assist. You can do something crazy as this. And even if your opponent push block it, you will still have to do. You could just instantly tag Neo out and then do Rachel's as you know, Rachel's pressure rushdown. So I'm giving an example. Oh dang. So it doesn't, I can't show you guys, dang. I can't show you guys, oh. But you guys get the point. And you can call out George, and then just do this. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention. You can do something like this. You can do something like that to make them stand still, and then your opponent will either have to guess if their Neo's going to do an overhead or do a low or just fake you. So yes, not the best symmetry, not as deadly symmetry as like I said with the four I mentioned, Elizabeth, Susanoo, Ruby, and Yumi, but those two can work. Those two can work. Now let's go over Hilda. Now Hilda functions similarly as to Elizabeth. So her 5P assist helps her, help Rachel's rushdown. Rachel 6P. Hilda's 6P helps her get in closer so she can do her rushdown or to zone. And Hilda's 4P, it's great, but not great to defend Rachel if your opponent goes, berserk. Try to get to you as fast as possible. I usually use Hilda's 4P assist when my opponent's close towards the wall. Oops, hold on. scratch that. I don't think it would be a good idea. It would be so much better to just call out George instead. I really use Hilda's 4P assist, to be honest, when I play as Rachel. I don't really use it that much. With Hilda, you could do something like this, and then try to get closer. Also help out Rachel's rushdown. You know, just call her better overload this, and then try to get closer. Do your ridiculous rushdown. That's really all I have to say. Excuse me. Hilda's functions similarly to Elizabeth, only different is Elizabeth is much better than Hilda. So yeah, I think that concludes my guide with Rachel. If you have any questions, please do leave a comment and I'll try to answer them as fast as possible. With that, I'm going to conclude this video. Okay, I'll see you guys later.